It's basketball time at the Q.
One of the early favorites for NBA Coach of the Year, Cleveland's J.B. Bickerstaff. He's agreed to a new long-term extension, I'm told. J.B. Bickerstaff and their GM in Cleveland, Koby Altman, you see now the infrastructure of a young team that can be very good for a very long time.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way.
I don't necessarily call it growth, call it his ability to execute his plan.
The dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright.
So it speaks a lot to the caliber of ownership and leadership that they're giving Koby the runway to finish out his vision.
Rubber Rim Job. The fellas are back at it. Episode 5. Damage and Rich. Damage, how you doing, my brother?
I am doing wonderful, Rich. How you doing?
Man, I can't complain. I've been getting cussed out on the board. Everybody's like, where the hell are these episodes? But I literally just spent the last 10 days with my toes in the sand down in the Virgin Islands and celebrate my fiance's birthday and everything. So, man, I can't complain.
That's great, man. I've been stuck in the house for the past week and a half battling some bullshit. Bro, so they had me do these at-home tests. They all came back negative. And then you start reading, you're supposed to swab the back of your throat now to test for Omicron. I'm like, I'm not some nurse practitioner, so all right, fine. So it's like, okay, what's better? Do you do the throat first, then the nose, or the nose, then the throat? I'm like, either way is disgusting, but I'll go throat, then nose. That whole thing I messed up. So anyways, long story short, I turned out negative yesterday, but
congratulations, man.
Yeah, so I definitely, I know you're probably jealous, but that's awesome, man. So Virgin Islands, huh?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So we checked in with each other a few times before I headed off, and I knew that you were struggling and fighting some things off. So I'm grateful that everything came out negative and that you're on the other side of that, man.
To be perfectly honest with you, my man, I was praying I had it, because it's like, if this is it, like, it's not great, but like, I can at least function, I can move. It was all upper. And now I got those lovely antibodies in me.
Yeah.
So anyways.
We won't spend too much time on that, but I actually haven't experienced that yet. And I don't know how many years. Is it 2 years now that we've been doing this? I've had some some near scares, but I haven't actually bit that bullet yet. It's been really close to home, and so I'm grateful, and I keep doing everything precaution wise that I can to make sure. The Virgin Islands, to build on that real quick, they were super diligent with everything. Like, if you were out somewhere at a restaurant or something, and you, even for a split second, like, removed a mask or whatever, everywhere you went, they checked your temperature. It was like, I see why these types of places are not dealing with the same thing that, some more populated areas are. So I kind of appreciated that, and it put me at ease a little bit while we were vacationing. So.
Yep, we're looking to get somewhere. So
yeah.
We'll definitely take the U.S. Virgin Islands into account.
Please do. St. Thomas, and when we hop off of here, I'll throw some things your way.
Yeah, please do.
So while I'm, toes in the sand and all that, some of the best news that I've seen probably in like 10 years for me. And I'm not over-exaggerating this, right? Because my love for the Cavs, I dive deep, and it's not just what's happening on the court. Like, I like to look at the organizational structure. I like to compare us to how these other orgs are doing this with stability and all this kind of stuff. And man, it had been some gray days for me, right? Like, there was a little flash in the pan that resulted in our first championship, but it was an over-reliance and a heavy reliance on a lot of Bron. And so for me, I was just like, man, I wish, independent of that guy and independent of some of what, that all felt like, we could establish something that feels like we can sink our teeth in and see, like a real contender being built. And it truly feels like we're turning that corner, Damage, with these 2 extensions that just got awarded to Koby Altman and for JBB moving forward for the next few years. These guys are locked in. How you feeling about that?
Yeah, so I feel great about it. But I kind of want to go back to what you were originally talking about. I know you want to talk a little bit more in depth about Dan Gilbert.
Right.
But so But you made a really interesting point, and I harken back to obviously the days that we had LeBron and the day that Dan Gilbert took over. We know the first few years we didn't make the playoffs, but
What was that, 2005 or so?
2005,
Late spring 2005.
So the Cavs organization, and this is not like any new news by any means, but we were somewhat, I don't want to call it held hostage.
Right.
But we were stuck in this relationship with LeBron that traversed over not just from the first time, but that in between time where we're sort of in purgatory, and then he came back, right?
Right.
And I've mentioned this multiple times, and again, I'm not the only person to say this. LeBron is like a black hole. He sucks every single resource out of an organization for bad and for good, because hey, you're going to be depleted of everything. That's the bad news.
Right.
The good news is you're more than likely going to go to the NBA Finals and compete for a ring. So it's I don't want to call it a deal with the devil, because that's putting a negative connotation on it, and I
totally get it.
That's not my point.
Right.
But from an organizational structural standpoint, I can empathize with the conundrum that Dan Gilbert had.
Right.
I can empathize with the conundrum that the entire front office had. This is the first time I have seen any semblance of a structure within an organization. And look, and I know you're going to go off on Gilbert here for a little bit, but it took 3 coaches? Well, actually 2. You had Lou, but Lou doesn't really count because he was there with the championship ring.
Right.
But then you got Lou, and you had Beeline, and then they had JBB, who was sort of this interim guy. And all of a sudden, you're seeing what we have today. You got the extensions from Koby, extension from Bickerstaff. Again, I got to give Gilbert props because he's finally getting out of the way.
Right.
He's an aggressive dude. We're in an aggressive organization, but you're starting to see finally, as you mentioned, the fruits of the labor of we actually have a construct here, and everybody's sort of towing the same line. Everybody's working on a string with one another. And I, for one, think it's just fantastic.
Right. You like what you're speaking to is there's some, it looks like some growth from the guy that's sitting at the very, very top, right?
Yes.
So really quickly, let me prime my Gilbert stuff. I've long loved this guy. I mean, I'm talking about beyond just some of the sacrifices and the things that he's done to make sure that we stay competitive, and that he maximized the time that he had with Bron here and stuff. But I follow him on a philanthropic and some of his endeavors that are happening on the Detroit side and everything like that. Like, I don't miss interviews. I have an alert thing that pops up in Google whenever he's like on Goldman Sachs and Forbes and all this kind of stuff, man. I really dig where he's coming from as an executive, right? And a lot of the guys underneath him who've developed as he's become, the second richest owner in the league, I like seeing those guys grow too. So like I've the current CEO of Rocket Mortgage, I think his name is Jay Farmer or something like that. Like I'm locked in on this and I'm watching this. And the one place that stuck out like a sore thumb to me was here in this basketball world, where it just seemed like, man, this guy can't get out of his own way with this one. And it's like, is it just a hobby that he's like, well, let me do this, let me do that. There were times, when we made trades and we brought in Shaq and he's up there front and center. And I'm just like, okay, maybe it's a publicity thing. I don't know. But somehow damage over this little bit of time, and it may be the catalyst of it, may have been that stroke that he's still recovering from. And he's given interviews, even with ABC and CBS and stuff, where he talked about the way that humbled him as a human and had him reevaluate where he was putting his energy and time and everything like that. I don't know. But this looks and feels different, right? And I don't mean to marginalize Kobe's growth or JBB's impact on what's now looking like it's taking shape as these guys are starting to contend on the floor and stuff. But I think that all of this has to start in that top chair with Gilbert. So I wanted to show him a little bit of love, man.
But when this hard-charging entrepreneur had a stroke nearly 2 years ago, everything changed in an instant.
I'm feeling good. I'm getting better. It's like an inch a day, It's a marathon, this thing, coming back from it.
In that moment where you realize this has all changed, what is that like for someone like you?
Yeah, it's very scary for anybody. And you start to appreciate everything and everybody much more than you ever did.
Humbling?
Yeah, it's definitely humbling.
It was, hey, this is my second act of life right now. I'm in my second half of my life. And, I have a GM who is young. He learned. He's very aggressive, and we've seen that from time to time again. You can hate the Kyrie trade all you want, but at the end of the day, it was Kyrie's just not going to play for us. So we just the whole Ben Simmons route where he just sits and we don't do anything, or we try to make something out of this season.
Right.
And we went to the finals that year. We didn't win, but we got something in return. We went to the finals. So he is an uber aggressive GM. He's very smart, very calculated. He knows how to slide into these little side deals. Hey, I can poach this guy or get this pick or whatever the case is. He's being very smart with how he's utilizing his cap space. And just look at the quality of the draft picks that we've had over the past 4 years now. Okoro's the worst pick out of all of them, and he even flashed before he got injured and with COVID. So
right. So really quickly, this is my last Gilbert point, and we're going to transition over, and I'm going to build on your Kobe love right here. You're familiar with, and you love the show Succession on HBO, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm locked in on it as well. The season 3 just ended recently, and it was pretty awesome. But there's so many parallels with the way Gilbert runs this organization. And I know the Cavs are, for a guy, his portfolio and everything he's doing and stuff. But I've been like, man, look at what happened with Logan Roy in that first season when he had those health scares and stuff. And of course, that show is just extreme when it comes to, like the manipulation, all that kind of stuff. I'm not in any kind of way making that parallel. But that top executive who has these guys underneath him, and there's everybody perceives the organization as not being stable and everything like that. And then he has that health scare, and then he has to make some recalculations and all that kind of stuff. Like who is Koby Altman in this story if the good stuff from Logan Roy is being attributed to Dan Gilbert right now?
I'm with you, man. But are you suggesting that Koby Altman and Jose Calderon are on the floor fighting for a sausage?
That was a weird episode. To this day, I'm like, man, what was that kind of thing?
Dude, apparently rich white people do some weird, outlandish shit. So congratulations
on Jose Calderon being hired today, by the way. Totally caught me off guard.
Yeah, man. Anytime I see a vote tweet come out that starts with the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm like, oh fuck.
Right.
And it was like, wait, what? if you would have asked me to get 1,000, if you would have given me 1,000 guesses, that would have been like the absolute last one. Like Jose Calderon is going to be an assistant to the GM or whatever his title is. But
and this is almost
cool,
this is almost like going off on a tangent. But let me speak about Jose Calderon real quick, right? And we're going back to the court now. We're leaving the boardroom and we're coming back to the court just for a second. He tormented me for a little while because he was baptizing Kyrie for his first couple of years in the league. If you remember back, Kyrie and Dion, even before we drafted Dion, that first year for Kyrie, we played Toronto, I think, 4 times. Then that next year, when we first brought Dion into the mix, every time we played Toronto, this dude was going hard at Kyrie. And I could not understand it. I was like, man, you see him. It was like the Rubio playing internationally thing. You see him playing against all these other guys, and you're like, oh, he's just going through the motions. He's like a 10-point, 5 assist kind of point guard, solid, but never that. Every time he went up against Kyrie Irving, I was like, it must have been something personal or something. And then he ends up coming to the team, and I'm like, okay, I can actually appreciate this guy because now he's on our side kind of thing. And I don't know all of the behind the scenes with Calderon, like what all role he played in the locker room and everything. He's always been he's an international guy in the same vein as Rubio. He developed and helped Rubio come along as he joined the Spanish team at 15. So he's always been, considered, I guess, in the locker room, a great, leadership kind of guy. But man, it's just funny the way things come full circle. I hated when we used to play Toronto with a young Kyrie, getting baptized by this international veteran in Jose Calderon.
Well, 2 things about Jose Calderon that stick out to me. Number one, he always just seems like the happiest guy on the court. He always just had a smile on his face. Second thing, he had, and I know this because I had him on my fantasy team, like the strangest box scores. Like he would have like 7 points, 8 assists, 4 boards, 2 steals.
What is that?
Just almost like Draymond-esque type box scores, but as a point guard version of it.
Right.
And look, he wasn't very good, but he wasn't also bad either. And like you said, he would flash, particularly against the Cavs, and particularly when he was going against Kyrie Irving. Yeah. Every time he had the ball in his hands, he's just always Calderon is going to ruin my night, but he's going to.
He was like a great value Rondo or something like, or great value Draymond, where you, like you just said, you knew that he had this ridiculous IQ, but he didn't have the physical, everything he needed in order to, carry that IQ into translating to winning games and everything like that. But on any given night, when he knew how to sniff out his matchups and stuff, man. So I guess we're adding that now to that front office. I think it says special advisor, or the role is being determined.
I have zero expectations, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I have zero expectations because I literally have no idea what the hell he's going to be doing. I don't know anything about him. All I know is that he would really, cause havoc sometimes, and he just looks like a nice guy.
Okay, so
good for him.
The saddest thing for me about this, all of this stuff is transit, and this is like a season of ups and downs in regard to me personally. I lost my bae, Angel Gray, earlier in the season to a promotion that she took. And then this week, right after Koby signed his extension, I lost my GM crush, Andre Patterson. He just left to go join Portland and become the assistant GM there, which, dude, I've been telling Jig on these shows and stuff whenever I'm sitting at these games in person. I watch the games, of course, but there's so much more that's going around the court and everything that, like, it's I like to watch the game that's like going on between the game too. Every game I've been at, this guy has been like instrumental with culture building. Like when Sexton got ejected in that last game of the season, he's the first guy sprinting up the tunnel to go talk to this kid. Every time I've seen somebody get ejected or have an issue where they blow up with the coach or whatever, I see Andre Patterson on the phone and making his way over there. So for me, it's I'm happy that we're seeing some stability and everything. And Smooth called me out for it on the board. Shout out to Smooth because he knows how I feel about Andre Patterson, and I've been blowing this whistle about him for the last 2 to 3 years.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Let me ask you a question, Rich. When was the last time a Cavs front office got poached for a position?
Good call. That's pretty awesome. I would have to say
that, it's accentuating what we were just talking about,
right?
The stability within the front office.
Sure.
We're finally getting dudes. And not to talk about the Browns, but it's the equivalent of the Browns. The Browns have 2 guys who are right, and I cannot pronounce their names for the life of me, but they're right underneath Andrew Berry, and they're getting GM looks right now.
Right.
So it's just, but anyways, with the Cavs, it's like I honestly can't recall the last time we had a guy poached from our front office to potentially take over in a GM role.
And it's not just for coaching that always happens, right? Like it's, coaches bounce around a lot. So my first thought was watching Alex Jensen from the Charge as he's been extending. I think he's in the second chair over from Quinn Snyder now with the Jazz, but that's coaching, right? They do that. They hop around. When it comes to front office, like you talked about, what's his name that's up in New York now with the Knicks? Here, I think not Lance something, but here he was with our front office, and everybody's like, this dude is a genius. He found ways to make. He's like a salary cap.
Scott Perry,
not Perry. We're gonna edit this and pull this guy's name in because I really should have known it before I started talking about him.
If you could shed some light on Brock Aller.
Yeah, he's considered, I think, strategically very good. An executive who I think helps to shore up the details of building out your salary cap and building out your internal infrastructure. Those are important parts for an organization. I mean, there are a lot of elements that make up a good front office. And, I think his role is important to just keeping everybody together, aligned in terms of having a strategy moving out and having option A and B and C and D, because your top options or your top, the things you might like to do don't always happen, and to have a lot of contingencies in place. And I think Brock Aller is somebody who, Cleveland's had a few of those guys who've been really good at that. Another one that came through there and has moved on to be a GM, Michael Winger with the Clippers, had that role in Cleveland and then went to Oklahoma City and then on to LA. I think those are, Cleveland is kind of, you've seen some guys come through there who've been very good at that. And I think Brock Aller's another one.
But there's a salary cap guy who everybody around the league was considering he's one of the best in the league, and he was here with us throughout Gilbert's time here. And he's now in New York, and he's working magic. Like, they just pulled off this trade, this Cam Reddish for, like, garbage trade. And I know that he's a big part of that because he knows how to make these cap things happen. So that's the only guy I can think of that's made an ascending move from, a rank where he was at here to go into a bigger role. But that does speak to what you just said, stability, and Koby Altman is developing some guys underneath him that are starting to get, looked at for some promotion. So that's pretty awesome.
I just wish we could get draft picks compensation just like
Right,
the Browns. Because, if the dude from the Browns goes to the Giants or wherever else we'll get 2 third-round picks.
Okay.
So it's like, hey.
That would be awesome. No, I totally get that. Like when the Celtics got draft compensation from the Clippers and stuff, like we should totally do that for Andre Patterson or anybody else in the front office who's taking it.
Yeah, fair is fair, man.
So we want to pull in some more organizational love. JBB, we talked about this just briefly on that last episode, but now that we see that it's part of a whole strategic organization is really stable kind of thing, let's show him some more love. Your boy, you talked me down earlier in the season. I was like, man, there's, I know he's 42 years old, but some of these during this game management and all this kind of stuff, it's killing me. And damage, you're like, no, bro, like the human element, like look at how he knows how to press these buttons, give him a chance to grow on the job, like give him a chance. And now I am fully on board. So thank you for that. And he's so deserving of this extension right now. So JBB deserves a lot of love, and the extension that he got is really warranted. I'm really happy that happened for him.
Yeah, so I've seen some discourse about, this could be prisoner of the moment. The Cavs are finally good, and we're extending our coach, and I think that's complete and utter horseshit. I'll go back to last year. You and I have talked about this online and offline, that when it comes to coaching in the NBA, these guys more or less, and sure, you've got your upper echelon guys, right? And those guys are just otherworldly, like LeBron, Steph, KD, all those dudes.
Right.
But when it comes to sort of the middle of the pack, there really, everybody has their own unique talents or whatever, but there really isn't that much of a margin that's separating, let's say a Lamar Stevens from I couldn't even think of another guy, but you get my point. It's like,
I was about to say, I was wondering who your middle of the pack was, and you started off with a guy that I would say is at the bottom of I'm like, whoa, what is this middle of? No, I hear what you're saying. I was like, what?
But he'd be on he's on the low end of the spectrum of that middle of the pack.
Right.
But,
okay.
Maybe a terrible example, but the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of this is all collective buy-in, and a lot of this is you have to believe and trust in the person who's running the shit. And if you want to run through a brick wall for that dude, and the Cavs clearly do, and Bickerstaff held this team together with duct tape and glue last year, and now this year he's doing the same thing. Cavs have had the most roster. The roster's been affected the most of COVID than any other team. You could argue that we've had probably the most devastating injuries of any team, given the importance of Sexton and then Rubio to the positions. Okoro has also been injured as well. It's just he keeps the trains on the track every single time.
And the strongest strength of schedule up to date. So while we're facing those challenges you just brought up that JBB was navigating, we also had, not like quite possibly, but it's been statistically proven we had the strongest schedule leading up to, like the last week or so.
Strongest schedule, and most players out due to COVID.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Combine that, and given the fact that it's awesome. And so you could see it. You could see these guys just last year trusting one another a little bit more towards the tail end.
Sure.
Struck the lottery luck, got Mobley. Allen turned into this transformer that nobody saw coming. But I think the other thing I want to point out is, and this is something I mentioned on the previous podcast, he's not reactionary to a point of detrimental outcomes. And what do I mean by that is, you have a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who, by the way, I saw this. Lauri Markkanen is actually, the past 5 games, he's actually statistically been our best 3-point shooter, which it was like, I couldn't believe it when I looked at the stats. Somebody's going to fact check me on this, but there was some weird stat I saw. I was like, wait, what? He's missed like everything the past 5 games, but he's been in a slump. But he just said, you know what, dude, you're going to shoot your ass through this and you're going to be fine.
Right.
Okoro goes out. who does he put in? He puts in Lamar Stevens. Lamar Stevens has been having a breakout past 5 games.
I think he led the team in scoring against the Jazz, if I'm not mistaken.
Bro, he's past 6 games. He's averaging, I think, 11, 4, and 4, something of that effect. So the point I'm trying to make is that he doesn't get rattled. There comes a point in time where he can just cry uncle. Like if some of our major guys get injured, then it's like, all right, well, what can we possibly do here? But then you got Rondo coming in, and he's sort of playing that middle class version of Rubio. Just again, keeping the trains on the track and not letting anything steer too far to the left or the right. So I'm thrilled for him. This team has a complete buy-in. They trust him emphatically. Owning your own business, as do I. Culture is of equal importance to talent, in my belief. You're going back to the Heat. I mean, yeah, I hate them, but their culture, you can't beat it. Their culture is phenomenal there.
Right.
So,
agreed. And the way that they develop guys in their system with some of these former players they bring in, the Zoe Mornings, the Juwan Howard before he took Michigan's job, they develop these guys professionally, and then they develop them as executives and as coaches and all of that. And that's just awesome to see. And so we're sprinkling a little bit of that is what this is looking like here in this organization. A lot of Koby's vision translating and matching up with JBB's passion and ability to have his finger on the pulse of the heartbeat of these players and everything. It's just like what you talked about, the vision being set and being clear, so that these guys can grow and develop and play hard for each other and the organization. So this actually marks the 1-year anniversary of the Jarrett Allen trade. And that's one of Koby's biggest wins, like in the last 2 or 3 years. There was a lot that happened this summer, but right before the summer got started, there was some tumultuous transactions and things last season, the Andre Drummond, the KPJ, all that kind of stuff that was happening where everybody was like, what the hell is happening here? There's a lot of articles that were just like, look, is this guy's time coming to a close? It didn't just happen out the blue. He didn't just pop up and say, I'll take this 23-year-old center. Thank you very much. There's chatter on the board that he had been locked in and cultivating this happening for a couple of years before it ever came to fruition. So there's vision in something like this even coming to fruition where we're now celebrating having I don't even want to say potential. I feel like it's a shoe-in that Jarrett Allen should be an all-star this year. And we got him for nothing. We got him for a rack of balls and a second-round pick last year.
He has an easier path to becoming an all-star than Darius Garland is just by sheer numbers.
Right.
I think they're both equally deserving.
I
would probably contend that Garland probably is maybe slightly more deserving.
Slightly more, I would agree.
Given the fact that if he goes out, then it's slim pickings, man. But
I agree with that 100%. And so this marks that year anniversary since that happened. And it, it's awesome that almost like a year to the date that he's earning his extension as a result of the moves and the vision. We got lucky with the Mobley thing, but I truly don't believe that Mobley was the catalyst to this. I believe we saw spurts of it last year where the guys were playing for each other, buying into JBB a little bit more. And you started seeing wait, some of these young guys could be, and now we're here. We're here now, and it's pretty awesome to see on Koby and JBB's part. So we're mired. I mean, we are deep into this trade season, right? When I'm saying deep into the trade season, I'm talking about Twitter and the shams and the Woj and all that kind of stuff. They get started. December 15th or so, when some of those extension guys are ready, they get started chatting about it. By this time, a month later, they're in rare form, and you're seeing GMs throwing all kinds of misdirections and all that kind of stuff. We've got a month to go until the actual deadline, but it's starting to heat up. We had our first, big trade with the Cam Reddish going to the Knicks. But there's chatter everywhere, and there's the Cavs.
Would that be classified as a big trade? I'm just saying. I feel like Cam Reddish is getting a lot more ink to his name than he kind of deserves. But
let me say this real quick, Drama. So we've been having back and forth on the board. Los is my boy, right? But I'm telling you, when it comes to Cam Reddish, I see Paul George. I see this guy. If the structure and the coaching makes use of his talent,
Just going to refrain from commenting. Look, here's the thing.
My dogs are flipping out anyway, so we're going to have to chop this up anyway.
You're talking to a guy who was obsessed with Cam Reddish in the draft.
Okay.
Like, I just saw it, and I was like, man, if this dude can put it together, then, like you said, you got the Paul George body type and structure, just from a body size, just from a body type, and just the way he plays. But he was so deferential, and then you're like, well, he's got Barrett and Zion on his team, and maybe that's why. It's like, okay, cool. Then he goes to an Atlanta team filled with a bunch of guys who, and they draft a bunch of dudes that are basically the same position that he plays or equivalent position.
Right.
So I get why he wanted out, and I would probably want out if I was him, were him too. Do I think the Knicks fleeced the Hawks? Yeah, I think they got the much better end of the trade. Do I think that we're overhyping this trade? Yes, but I also know that this is the very first significant trade of the year, so it's going to get a lot more pub than
you got to get excited about the first trade. The trade season is really here now.
Yeah, it is. This was a deal. I mean, this was not a small deal. It was definitely a deal. And good for Cam Reddish and the Knicks.
How long until Tom Thibodeau kills him? Like, what are you like? What's the over under? 10 games? Like, what's like?
Depends, man. I mean, he does have such a laid back attitude. I don't know. Yeah. I honestly, I have not seen enough Cam Reddish in Atlanta play for me to make any determination. But I will say this: if he does buy into Thibodeau's defensive style and prowess, then it's going to be he could unlock that potential that you're thinking of.
And so there's been our boy Pip on the board. He loves him some Bol, and the same time he loves Bol as much as he hates Dylan Windler. But at the same time that trade went down for Reddish, then we also had Bol being traded from Denver to Detroit. Within a few days, they actually rescinded the trade and said the guy couldn't pass a physical. But the trades are starting to pick up a little bit. Like, we're not just seeing Shams and Woj just kind of squaring off at each other right now. We're actually starting to see a little bit more smoke, and some of these deals are starting to go through.
I want to be Cav specific. I'm sort of split between two different lines here.
Right.
The Cavs should absolutely make a move. And I think they either have to go one of two directions. Direction number one, a small move just to complement and round out the roster. Don't get into that luxury tax this year. Small moves, meaning I have it written down right here. Like, I've loved Ty Jerome ever since he was at Virginia. I think that would be an absolutely perfect addition to this team. He is exactly what we want Dylan Windler to be. And I've seen Dylan Windler get a little bit more uptick in minutes. But I just think Ty Jerome would be an absolutely perfect fit. Get him from OKC. Sure. So 2.4 should be a pretty easy trade. Guys like Vanderbilt, Jalen Noel on Minnesota. Again, these guys that can sort of rough out the edges, your 8th, 9th guy. Won't cost a lot. Could pick up some points boards for you. Noel is a guy that I've liked for a bit now. He can shoot the three. He can guard multiple positions. Not a great ball handler. Then you get into your larger trades, and it's the part two of this, and that's going to be the all-in portion. And the guy, and I've said it on the board, and the guy that I've been obsessed with, and the guy I think will be the absolute quintessential perfect fit for your Cleveland Cavaliers is... Who am I going to say? Who do you think I'm going to say? One guess.
OG Anunoby.
No, wrong. DeJounte Murray.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I didn't see that coming.
No.
I guess
Let me make the case.
In my time on the beach with my toes in the sand and stuff, I think I may have missed some of these posts because I didn't see your DeJounte Murray love yet.
Well, listen, I'm also kind of going off of Mbubi We Trust's post saying, because he said that the Cavs were interested in some San Antonio guards and they were throwing out Bryn Forbes, which, okay, sure, that's sort of the Ty Jerome ilk, which I'd be totally fine with. Bring the boy back home. And I forget what else somebody else threw out, but then he said, no, think of the other guards.
Yeah, I want to show some love. I don't mean to step on you. I want to say Juice is Loose also popped up and was planting some seeds on some Spurs guys. So, yes, DeJounte Murray is a beast. I've loved him. I followed him since Washington. I've followed him for some time. But then Lonnie Walker is another name that's been mentioned a little bit. You said Bryn Forbes. And then I don't know if Vassell, or however you pronounce it, is what his availability is. But those names have
Tomato.
Those names have come up a little bit.
Look, if you look at the roster construct, they've got Vassell, again, tomato. They got Primo, and I'll get into Primo in a second. They got Keldon Johnson. They got Bryn Forbes. They got DeJounte Murray. They got Derek White. I'm probably missing somebody else.
Lonnie Walker.
Joe Wieskamp. You got about 4, 5, 6 dudes who, not saying they all play the same position, but they can moonlight and overlap in the same position.
Right.
Going back to Primo. Primo is starting to see a lot of minutes now, and it's sort of the San Antonio way. He's starting to see a lot of burn, and he's actually playing very well. Primo and Murray, to me, Primo's goal should be let me look at exactly what DeJounte Murray is doing, because that's the guy I'm going to be.
Sure.
And he can be that guy because they're very similar in height, very similar in body composition, very similar in playing styles. So my argument for DeJounte Murray is that, yes, his salary is actually quite low compared to what you think it is. I think it's about 15, 16 million. He's owed that for 3 more years. They got a bunch of dudes coming up on extensions. Lonnie Walker, Vassell in 3 years, Primo in 4 years, so that's not coming up. Keldon Johnson in 2 years. Are you going to extend all these dudes? Almost similar to an Atlanta situation, only, we're talking about the shooting guard, point guard / small forward spot. If the Spurs want to capitalize on DeJounte Murray, they would trade him now, get some real nice assets in return. Either they can flip them or get a third team involved and let Primo run the show. And you get a couple firsts, maybe a shooting guard, small forward, another point guard if you want, and then you can flip those around. So is it realistic? Hell no. But it is my dream. More realistic is going to be Lonnie Walker. Right. And to me, if that's your consolation prize, then I'd be all for that as well.
Sure. That's good research on your part, man. Great work. I want to speak to that a little bit. I love player development and watching these kids from the preps and stuff. I didn't really get a chance to watch Ntilikina before he got drafted by the Knicks. But ultimately, when I saw him start playing up there, he very much paralleled in size and build and everything like that what I saw from a young, rookie year DeJounte Murray coming out of Washington when he first got to San Antonio. And the difference between the way those two programs developed those two kids speaks to, what we're talking about. Like the Knicks have wasted assets and thrown guys away up until just now recently. And then the Spurs have always taken the slow route with developing guys, the Kawhis and all that kind of stuff. So to piggyback off what you're saying, the only place where I think DeJounte would be really tough to pry away is that they don't have that guy in front of Primo already who, like Popovich is not just going to hand the ball off to this 18-year-old kid and say go. But I really, really like the way he's coming along. He's both him and a guy who I like a whole lot, damage over in OKC is Teo Maledon. I want to say he played in French international as well, but he's just now turning 19 and this is his second pro year. And he's got similar body build to Primo and DeJounte Murray, but he's just stuck. And now that Giddey is, doing what he's doing, SGA has already established himself. That kid is in the same vein as the Primos. And, I really like watching this kid as he's developing and stuff. And he's very much like a year ahead of where Primo is at already. DeJounte Murray will be awesome. Lonnie Walker is what they're saying on the board is more realistic. Walker and Forbes, and I'm not excited. I think, didn't Forbes go to Cleveland State, if I'm not mistaken? And then he
sure as hell did.
He sure did. I'm not super excited about the prospect of that, but that would not be rocking. That would not be rocking the boat too much as an acquisition. I like what you did there, where you broke these down into tiers, and you talked about some of those. Hey, let's fill in this kind of guy. One of the names that's been big on the Twitterverse right now, and they're discussing a whole lot, is of course Eric Gordon down in Houston. How you feel about that? You there?
Is the silence deafening?
Oh, I'm like,
yeah, no, that's my comment. You can chop that up if you want. I would rather. There's many things I'd rather do. I'd rather get coronavirus than trade for Eric Gordon. The dude has 3 years left on his contract. I don't even want to talk about it. Like, it just doesn't make it just, he is the antithesis of what logic would say what Koby should do. Right. And if you read the tea leaves of what this front office looks for, they're looking for uber athletic, switchable guys who don't have a big checkered injury past, that are young within this timeline. Or the opposite is an older veteran who can round out the roster, who's not going to cost them that much.
Right.
Now, the Rubio trade was different because we needed a guy to run the entire second unit, and that obviously paid off until it didn't. But Eric Gordon, to me, logically just makes zero sense. And the other thing, and you know this as well as I do, whenever you hear about a rumor, 99.99% of the time means it's not going to happen. If you hear about it, it's not going to happen unless it's just something that just so outlandishly makes sense that it's like, oh yeah, well, this obviously is going to happen.
Right.
Anyways, so to answer your question, no, I think Eric Gordon is the absolute worst idea.
So I don't really have any feelings about Eric Gordon. There was a point in time where I was like, oh, he's this tough guard. And then there was something happened where he actually got paid in New Orleans or something like that. In order to get traded, he basically quit on him. You know, like once you do that with me, you know, like I'm a basketball purist. It's hard for me to invest in you again and to really look at you like you're that difference maker kind of guy. And with me, that was like a stain that happened. You know, Eric Gordon, Harden just did it. Simmons is doing it right now. I know that there's a business side to basketball, but I love it so much that I just feel like the business side would always be secondary to like loving the hoop. And so from that standpoint, the Gordon thing is just not that for me. There was a time when he first came out of Indiana.
Oh, I loved it.
I want to say, what was he, like the 5th pick or something in that draft? There was a time where he was like the toughest. He was one of the tougher young guards. I was like, wait, what is this guy?
7th pick. Yeah.
7th pick, yeah. When he came out of Indiana, I was like, he's like a combo guy, but if he could just get enough of ability to create, he could be dangerous. And he, of course, trended in the total opposite direction, just became a spot-up guy. But anyway.
It just doesn't make sense. If it does, it doesn't make sense from a contractual or an age sense.
Right.
From a positional sense, I see it. From a money sense, yeah, you can offset with the Rubio contract and it's a 1-to-1. Like you just get a swap. I would actually ask back for a pick if they're going to do that because they get that Rubio expiration and we're taking on a larger salary. So you got to give me something else to get off this Eric Gordon salary if that's what you want.
So really quickly, since we did bring them up earlier, and I'm not getting off the trade talk, the Blazers are officially sellers. They got some weird stuff going on over there. McCollum and Lillard are basically, you know, off the court and really just kind of like getting those checks right now. And that's what Andre Patterson is walking into. So there's a lot of guys in Portland who should be available and could be, you know, fill in the blank kind of guys. But there's one guy specifically I know that I've long been like, man, Rchfld, I love watching Rchfld. He's a very smart, very selfless, and he guards 2 through 4. You know, there's, you know, everybody's like, oh, bring back Larry Nance and all this kind of stuff. But there's, you know, Little that's up there. There's a lot of guys that are in Portland. There's Anthony Simons that's been mentioned, and, you know, he scored 40 or something like that the other day. But Rchfld has long been a guy that I was like, he could be a great addition if we were able to get our hands on that guy. How you feel about Rchfld?
I like him. I thought you were going towards the Nasir Little conversation.
Yeah.
That's a dude I loved in college. Fortunately, his game hasn't progressed as much as I thought. He's getting better. I'll give him that. This is his best year by far. But they're also down numbers. Rchfld, yeah, I'm good with it, man. I think Anthony Simons is untouchable because they're going to trade. Well, I say that only because I think they're going to rebuild around him. Sure. I think they're going to rebuild around him. I think they need to shed themselves from Covington, which, you know, he's got 1 year left on his deal. But I think they're going to just rebuild around Simons.
He's a talented kid, and he's been being groomed behind an all-star and a potential all-star for the last few years while he matured. So that would make a lot of sense. The only, you know, I'm a diehard Tar Heel. Little to me, you know, we're doing these comparisons while we're talking about these potential trade targets. Little to me has so much Justice Winslow to him. You know, as a Tar Heel, watching Duke and North Carolina battle and being like, I'm so glad that we don't have Justice Winslow. And then literally the next year, I'm watching Nasir Little, and I'm like, this is Justin Winslow. I haven't had a chance to watch him as he's starting to take a little, like assert himself a little bit more in that rotation.
I think it's by numbers, though. He's still stiff. Okay. I mean, that was his biggest issue. Yeah. He's just a stiff guy, kind of like Winslow was.
Who else is on your board that you got in your tiers that we maybe haven't discussed here that you're like, wait? Because, I mean, there's an entire league. We covered maybe 2 or 3 teams of available guys.
Honestly, I mean, you look at, like, you know, look at the bottom of the standings. That's where everybody sort of gravitates their eyes towards. But outside of that, man, honestly, I've been really focusing on these San Antonio guards. And I already mentioned the name Ty Jerome. That's kind of sort of my sleeper guy who I think would be a really nice, valuable Joe Harris light pickup for this team, that he just has 1 role, 2 roles, get open and shoot threes. And that's really all you need to do, man. And he's really good at it. And
he's very, very smart. Yeah. I loved I'm since I'm a Tar Heel guy, I'm ACC, and I liked watching those Virginia teams. I've always loved Tony Bennett, and so he had Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy in that backcourt along with DeAndre Hunter, and I'm always butcher this guy's name. I think it's Nikita or something like that. Whatever hit that swing man that reminded me of Hakeem Warwick a lot. And Ty Jerome was always my favorite guy out of that group. He just did whatever needed. Like he was like Grievous Vasquez back at Maryland, but he had the agility and the mobility to actually impact games on both ends.
Grievous Vasquez.
Vasquez, as long as he had the ball in his hands, he was like, you could totally see him win games for Maryland. Ty Jerome did things on both ends. Like there were games where for Virginia, they got upset that junior the year before they won the national championship, they got upset in the first round. And then when they came back, Ty Jerome was like the glue that pushed them to that national championship. So that's awesome that you liked it. Yeah, I love watching that kid play. So the team and the guys who I have my heart set on just keeping an eye on because I know something's going to give is the Orlando Magic. And you got Terrence Ross down there, who's one of the guys at the top of my list. But then you got a couple of other guys there. It's just a weird logjam of they've actually got like some weird young talent that just doesn't fit together. And Orlando's doing some weird things down there. So I've been keeping my eye on them because I personally, I sat courtside for the Magic game right after Thanksgiving. And I sat there and I just watched Terrence Ross shoot. And I was like, dude, he would be so perfect for us. Like he would slide in at either the 2 or the 3. He's instant offense anytime that he hits the court, like unconscionable shooter and scorer. He's really like Will Barton, but a better shooter. So that's a guy who I feel like would be a minimal cost to us, but could pay off like big time. I would totally want Terrence Ross over like an Eric Gordon or any of those other type of plug and play shooter guys that have been mentioned. So
would you rather have Gary Harris or Terrence Ross? Just for some reason, I just always equate him with being an underachiever when he was on Toronto.
Sure.
Been this perpetual 9 to 13. Just out of curiosity, just want to get your thoughts on Gary Harris.
Sure. I like Gary Harris. I watched him from Michigan State going into Denver. He played such a pivotal role for some of those Denver teams, and he just complimented Jamal Murray. He was like the guy who just did all the dirty work until his body started breaking down on him, which leads me to want Terrence Ross more because I haven't seen Gary Harris healthy in quite a few years. And I know, if he came here and he mentored Okoro on how to better do this and, how to, just fill the blanks in and everything like that, that would be cool. But I always felt like Ross could actually win you games with his offensive ability. When he was in Toronto, that actually, to me, I felt like Dwayne Casey held him back a lot. I'm not saying like Terrence Ross was some all-star or something like that, but I definitely felt like he could have. There was a point in time where he could have cracked their rotation and been that other guy. You had the Lowry and DeRozan backcourt, but I felt like Terrence Ross could have helped them before he got shipped away. And he's just been in purgatory down in Orlando since then.
No, I was saying, I feel like he's been in purgatory his entire career.
Yeah, he played for Lorenzo Romar up in Washington, and I liked him when I saw him. It wasn't like a Markelle Fultz or something like that where you're like, maybe he's on the West Coast and I don't know what I'm looking at. I was like, that dude's got NBA talent. I think he was like a finalist for one of the dunk contests or something. Like he has been in purgatory, and he's always been like, if this guy got consistent minute, could he be that? And then he just kind of like blue balls or something. Like, you're just like, man, I'm right there.
He just did it.
I just didn't get it. I was right there. And it just, when I needed him to come through, he just didn't come through for me. So that's pretty funny.
He's been on a tear lately, man. Terrence Ross, he's been averaging 20 points a game since he's gotten back from injury.
Oh, good call, man. Good call.
Past 6 games.
Yeah, when I was sitting there watching his pregame and then when he came back out for halftime, he literally didn't miss damage. Like, he was out there, and I was like, man, I didn't know this guy was that dead-eyed because you don't see him during the game shoot like that. But so really quickly, I want to touch on this really quickly because I have a all thing love for Rajon Rondo, right? And I want to touch on this as we're talking about trades and team constructions and everything like that. I love the vision that Koby has for this team because, like, when the Rubio trade happened, I made this list last spring of guys who need to be considered for that all elusive backup point guard thing that we couldn't fill for a long time. 2 names at the top of that list were Ricky Rubio, and at the time Rondo was still in Atlanta, and I was like Ray John Rondo. I went to my first Lakers game at Staples, my birthday 2019, and we got to sit courtside, and I was watching everything that was happening. It was against the T-Wolves. It was LeBron had just started taking his little break where he was trying to get all those young guys traded and stuff. It was January, but he was off for like 2 or 3 weeks until the trade happened. And the only guy that was out there was Rondo. You know, they had Ingram, they had Ball, they had all the young guys. But the guy who steered those guys and had those young guys coalesce around him and made a game out of something that shouldn't have been a game. There was so much that was happening, like the way he was talking the ball, the way he was in everybody's ear and stuff. I was just like, man, like what we saw him do when he was in Chicago, when he turned those, they were like one Rondo injury away from upsetting Boston. Do you remember a couple years back?
Yeah.
He did the same thing there. So when Rubio went down and everybody's like, oh, we need to go get this guy and that guy and all these guys that were, you know, like these young guys who could potentially grow and do this and do that. I was just like, man, I wish there was a way that the Lakers would, and literally damage. The next thing I knew, we were acquiring him from the Lakers. And I was like, man, I'm really, really happy right now. And what he is, he's a basketball savant in the same vein as like a Draymond, or, you know, like there's been guys like the Shane Battier where you're just like, this dude is super talented, but he like thinks the game first and he sacrifices a lot. And he just like, he probably knows more than the coach that's on the sidelines about what's unfolding in front of him and everything like that.
No, I was just saying that's why him and Doc didn't get along too well.
Absolutely
and it's
not.
I think it's been well publicized because Doc was like, yeah, the guy was a pain in the ass, but not in a negative way. He's a pain in the ass because he's as smart, if not smarter than me.
Right.
And he's just calling out things before I can even see them.
There's been so many guys that he's run into it with. Doc, Rick Carlisle, just last year or the year before last year, he did that same thing with Kawhi where he blew up on him they had this end of game possession where Kawhi ended up shooting his fadeaway 3 like he was back in Toronto playing against Philly. And Rondo literally walked up to him and was like, what was that? You know, but it was like what are you thinking? Like kind of thing. And so like, he's always been this unapologetic, but I see the game this way kind of thing. And I really hope that he's approaching this with the right mindset. If we could get Rondo every game moving forward for the rest of the year, can we please have Colin Sexton sitting next to Rondo? And can we please, like seriously, like just soak up his brain, let him talk the game to you, because you're like Sexton is so talented. Also, just impart everything you've got into Darius Garland. But that was an awesome pickup for me, and I was really excited about it. We hadn't had a chance to talk about it since it happened. He's going to give you 10 minutes or so until the other guy. But I really, really like what he does from a developmental standpoint for some of these young guards. So.
Well, it goes back to when we were first talking about Bickerstaff and Koby, that the goal is just keep the train on the tracks. And Rondo is not going to give you the same output Rubio will.
Right.
But what he does is he provides a stability, albeit at a lesser pace and a lesser role and a lesser output. He is of that same ilk that a Rubio is. And, but yeah, no, I think it was a perfect move. I think both Garland, I think the whole team should probably be listening to him, but especially Garland and Sexton. Just because I think they can just learn a ton from this dude. He's just so smart, so cerebral. But no, it was such a sly, smart, again, just a small but yet smart pickup. Like it's not going to move the needle too much, but the ramifications on and off the court are just going to be, just immeasurable, really. Well, on the court immeasurable, but off the court immeasurable.
I'll say this last part about that, and then we're going to transition into some of these more recent games. We'll talk about like the games that are coming up, and then we'll close this thing out if you don't mind. Yeah. I feel like, so both of us love DG the PG, right? And we see his trajectory, and we're hoping that he continues developing the way that he's showing he should. I think I saw a tweet where Donovan Mitchell was like, this dude is already an all-star. I love the way the guys who are real hoopers and they know the game have been validating this guy all year. But for DG and for Sexton and for some of these young guys, this is like getting your PhD, to go from, having a half season where you can pick Rubio's brain to now, being able to pick Rondo's brain. It's like, man, you could not have scripted this, like there's no way that you're going to replace what Rubio was giving this team. But
correct.
If his contract and that exception that they've been talking about on the board and everything like that can be used to help fortify some things, and then you plug in somebody who has the same brain, is just a couple years older and not as capable anymore, to impart wisdom and do some developmental, mentoring and all that kind of stuff, it was really a win-win. So I'm really happy that this played out the way it did with Rondo sitting over there now. How we looking on right now? I believe we've got tonight the San Antonio Spurs coming in, and we've got I don't have the upcoming schedule in front of me.
Thunder. We got the Thunder tomorrow.
Okay, so we got the Spurs and then the Thunder back to back.
Yep.
And then
another lovely 3 games in 4 nights.
I was gonna say it's like 4 games in 5, because then we play Martin Luther King Day in the middle of the day against the Brooklyn Nets at full strength. So we gotta.
Yeah.
As much as we're talking
those 3 p.m. games, man.
Yeah, as much as we're talking about the schedule is lightening up and everything like that, like the way the schedule with days and stuff are laid out, there's still a gauntlet. Like it's when you think about the way these guys have to recover and get ready and playing back to backs and everything like that. Like there's very much still a gauntlet, and my hope is that JBB with his finger on the pulse. I think I saw somewhere Okoro is questionable, but he might actually get in tonight. I'm hoping we don't have anything catastrophic come our way in regard to that, because I'm really counting on JBB having his finger on the pulse of where these guys are energy-wise and stuff for these next few games here.
Got a chance to go 5-1 on this road trip. A real legitimate chance to go 5-1 on this road trip. And the Golden State Warriors game, I'm just throwing that one in the trash, because there was so much emotion built up for that game. I was hoping, obviously, like everybody, that they'd show up better, but I was not surprised in the least to see the output that was performed. That was like the most playoff atmospheric game that the Cavs have played in probably the past 3 years, and it's not even close. So I'm not shocked at the output. What I was shocked was how centralized or how immobilized that our front court was.
Right.
That they were just constantly just getting in the way of those pick and rolls and the lobs and everything. But yeah, man, look, that's one game of many, and they got a chance to go 5-1 here. I think they match up very well against the Spurs. I also think that OKC could cause them some problems just because of their size. With Giddey and SGA, those are 2 bigger guards, man, and Garland's going to have some issues.
Sure,
again, luckily we do have Allen and Mobley, who, by the way, Allen's like number 1 and Mobley's the 4th best rim protector in the NBA. I just saw that stat come out
Good call.
today.
I saw that tweet where they had all 5 of them, and it was like 2 Cavs on the top of that top 5. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's pretty crazy, but then you got Dort, who's just a pain in the ass to go against. Poku. I'm just joking about Poku. But the point is that they got some dudes that can cause some matchup problems in their backcourt. So yeah. I think we can win both games pretty handily, but I do think OKC has a more tough roster than people give them credit for.
I would agree with that, and I like that you're what is it, Kevin Love fan on the board, a lady that's on the board who is actually an OKC fan as well. She's been showing some love to OKC for like a year or 2, and because of that, every time I see her post and she's like, "Oh, I'm about to go watch this and watch that," I've been like, "Wait, they actually have a little bit of talent." Like he's not actively trying to make them win and everything. He's just trying to accumulate top end talent. But weirdly, he's got a collection of talent over there right now. There are about 5 or 6 guys that I'm like, they would be in our rotation, like for real, and some of them towards the top of it. So OKC is deceptively, they got a little bit of talent actually.
Well, you mentioned Maladon. I mentioned Ty Jerome. Trey Mann is pretty damn good.
I like Kenrick Williams. I don't know if you're familiar with him. When he was in New Orleans, he's like a 6'7" power forward, but he's like a do-it-all Jared Dudley kind of guy. But go ahead. Sorry, you were saying Baisley.
No, that's it, man. They got just a bunch of young dudes they're just all trying to figure it out, mixing with some older dudes. But yeah, I mean, they're like you said, they do have some decent roster. They have a decent roster construct. It's just weird at this point, but I think they're fine with it because they're all super young and they're just like, hey, let's just see what the cream will rise to the top for this team.
To speak to that Golden State game really quickly, because I think it's a blessing in disguise for us. There are not a lot of teams in the league who have that level of defense and defensive intensity, along with the experience, to totally take away the offense the way that Golden State did. But there are two in the East, I would say, and that's Milwaukee and Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Both Milwaukee and Miami have that level of experience. And everybody's like, oh no, but we're killing Miami. No, they're resting guys like PJ Tucker and some of these veterans, Lowry. Like PJ Tucker and Lowry may have been on the court together for like 2 games this year or something. But when that unit is all the way together, when they're all humming, and I'm pretty sure after the trade deadline, they're going to go balls to the wall. They're going to be really tough. So I think a game like that with Golden State, where this young team that's Garland, Mobley, Allen, these guys are trying to figure out how to still, go to that second option and stuff like that in their offense. That's going to be a blessing for us for when we get into those playoffs and we face those, like the Milwaukees, the Miamis, Brooklyn hasn't shown it all the way on defense yet, but eventually that talent is going to meld. So I like that we get those kind of tests, and I want to see growth. So
I would even submit a third team on that list that you're talking about. I think Toronto, when they're full strength, they are going to be a bitch to deal with. Just their switchability, how tough they are. Yeah,
good call. I didn't think about that. Good call.
Every single dude on their team's like either 6'1" or 6'8" or 6'9".
And they're a game behind us now. They've been dangerous since Siakam came back. When he first came back, he looked like he was off for a long time. But now he's starting to round into shape, and man, they look dangerous. They've my pick, my second guy on my board was always Scotty Barnes, and there's so much interchangeability that Usai has put together up there. So good call.
OG, Pascal,
man,
Scotty Barnes, hell, Gary Trent can even switch. I mean, it's tough, man.
Just a ragtag bunch. We've had some great games with them early in the year, but they've none of the times that we've played them like that first game that we played them where Garland won the game with the free throws and everything. I think they didn't have Pascal at the time, but they weren't at full strength then. But now Nick Nurse is starting to get to play, and good call. Yeah. Toronto's going to be dangerous. So
they will be.
Yeah. So man, this is meaty. This is some substance here. We
sure is.
We've got a great couple of days here. Would you say it was 3 games in the next 4 days that are going to be coming up here?
Unfortunately. Yeah. For like the 800th time in the past 8 weeks. So yeah.
we look forward. We're actually going to have we're scheduling right now a couple of these episodes to get taken care of early next week. Looking forward to jumping back in the saddle and turning these out in a more timely manner. I appreciate you jumping on today, man. Thank you for giving me some of your time here in the middle of this Friday here, Damage.
Yes, sir, Rich. Thank you so much, and glad to be on again. And hopefully I get to talk to you soon. All right.
Enjoy this game tonight, man.
Well, here we go.
This is Joe Tate. Have a good night, everybody.